Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending, and welcome to the meeting of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. My name is Councillor Terry Fox. I am the local council of Castle Ward and chair of this committee and leader of the council. The meeting is open for the public. However, Appendix 4 on item 17, which is on the agenda, is not available to the public or press. So if anyone wants to raise any issues on that, please, if you can identify, and then we will obviously bring that at the end of the meeting and ask for the public and press to kindly leave the meeting. We have received one question from the member of public today by Simon Ogden, and we will take that and deal with that at item 6. So if I can just request that all mobile telephones and electronic equipment are switched to silence, so not as to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from Town Hall staff and the assembly pointers in Tudor Square. Can I now please just ask each member of today's committee to introduce themselves? I'll start with members and then go to officers. So if I can, Brian.
Councillor Brian Lodge, member for Burley Ward and vice chair of co-chair of finance.
Thanks, Brian. Martin.
Yeah, I'm Martin Smith, councillor for Dore and Totley Ward. I'm also chair of the Economic Development, Skills and Culture Committee.
Thanks, Martin. Richard.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Williams, member for Stannington and chair of Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee.
Thanks, Richard. Paul.
Good afternoon. My name is Councillor Paul Wood and I am the member for the Woodhouse Ward.
Thanks, Paul. Shafak.
Sheffield Mohammed Ecclesall.
Thank you, Joe.
Councillor Jonathan Dunn, Totley Ward and chair of Waste and Street Scene.
Mick. Shout up.
I'm Councillor Mick Rooney. IT challenged as always. I'm Councillor for Woodhouse and I'm co-chair of the Education, Children and Families Policy Committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Mick. Douglas.
Douglas Johnson, City Ward and chair of housing.
Thank you. Angela.
Councillor Angela Argentio, member for Broomhill and Charleville and co-chair of the Adult Health and Social Care Policy Committee.
Thank you, Angela. Rachel.
I'm Rachel Marshall, Principal Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. David.
David Hollis, Interim Director of Legal and Governance.
Kate.
Kate Josephs, Chief Executive.
Thanks, Kate. Kate. Thank you. And can I ask all officers when they present their reports, if we can, just introduce themselves first. So thank you for that. Apologies for absence, Rachel. We've got Councillor Julie Grocott. Is it any more? Oh, okay, thank you. Exclusion of public and press, as above, as I've spoken about the final appendix to item 17. Is there any declarations of interest? Angela?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to declare a personal interest in item 12 and 13 as I am a trustee of City of Sanctuary.
Thank you, Angela. Any more declarations of interest? If not, thank you. Next, we go on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree those? Agree? Thank you. The next item on that will be public questions. Can I ask Mr. Ogden to take place and use the microphone? I think you know how it operates, Simon, so thank you. If you could ask your questions.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Simon Ogden, retired town planner, trustee and chair of the Upperdon Trail Trust, a registered charity established to promote safe public access along the rivers Don and Little Don between the Peak District in Langsett and Ladies Bridge, where it links to the Five Ways Walk, Canal Towpath and Transpennine Trail. All our questions relate to item 9, the report on Stocksbridge Towns Fund. The Trust, along with Stocksbridge Town Council, Bradfield Parish Council and National Cycling Charity Sustrands, have successfully promoted the construction of several missing links to the trail to the Stocksbridge Towns Fund, and the project was included in the successful Levelling Up bid programme that they won. The route is shown on the plan that some of you have got in front of you now. The Trust then negotiated in-principle way leaves with Liberty Steels, Warncliffe Estate, Forestry England and Yorkshire Water, and attended every public consultation event. We've been very regular and active members of the Town's Fund Health and Wellbeing stakeholder group for the last 18 months and have shared our local and professional knowledge until further meetings were abruptly cancelled without explanation in July of this year. The report in front of you suggests that several projects within the programme are now likely to be paused due to budget limitations or possibly leading to their demise, I quote. A potentially fatal setback for most. It does not reveal which ones they are or by what criteria they have been selected. However, their identity can possibly be deduced as those not mentioned in Appendix 1 of the report, namely skills and education, improved access and wayfinding, cycling and walking trails, and Riverdon improvements. Our questions, which I'm going to give you in a second, were all originally raised with the relevant officers through the stakeholder group, which is where we would have expected them to be answered. However, after 4 months, we have still to receive even an acknowledgement, still less an answer to those questions. We even tried to arrange a virtual meeting through one of the board members at Stocksbridge with the programme manager last week, but this too was turned down. Hence, our reluctant decision to raise them in this forum, which we acknowledge is not really the best place to do it. We think this committee and the public should be rather better informed about this significant decision, its rationale and implications, than the report gives you. So the questions are these. Can officers clarify which projects may be put forward by them for pausing and possible abandonment as described in paragraph 125, and why there has been no stakeholder engagement to explain or possibly avoid this situation through cost savings or additional funding bids? Secondly, what criteria will be used to assist the Town's Fund Board in deciding which projects are to be paused? Will more recent public consultation results and stakeholder views on these proposals be sought and reported to the December board, which is later on this week? Thirdly, how has the Trails project in particular gone from, I quote, within budget and locked down, as reported by the programme manager in the June stakeholder notes, to circa £1 million over budget in the meeting in July, without further explanation or dialogue? Can officers share with stakeholders the makeup of the increased costs and any alleged scope creep to which officers have referred? If, as we believe, this increase is mainly due to the cost of a commuted sum relating to Holmes Farm Bridge, why has the option of omitting the bridge from the project scope not been considered, as was suggested by stakeholders? 2 more. Have all the in-principle way leaves negotiated by the Trust with Yorkshire Water, Warncliffe Estates, Liberty Steel and Forestry England been secured formally by the Council, and if so, why has this not been reported to anyone? Has the possibility of additional funding for the Trails project been sought from either South Yorkshire Metropolitan Combined Authority or Sustrans? And finally, has an outline business case been completed for the Trails project? Will that be available to the December Towns Fund Board? Can it also be shared with stakeholders in advance? As the accountable authority for the funding, we believe that the Council Strategy and Resources Committee should have more information and say in this critical decision process than is presented today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Quite a few questions there. I've got the answers, but obviously I'm going to be reading them out. So if you want them, send it on, and then you can obviously have time to peruse them as well. So they'll go in the minutes. So thank you very much for that. Very helpful. I'll have a look at that later on. So thank you very much. So I'll read them out. Sorry about this, but I will be reading them out for you. It will obviously be on the webcast, but we will get them email out to you as well, okay? Okay, and they'll go into the minutes as well, Rachel's just informed me. So, on your first question, the Towns Fund Board are responsible for the commissioning and prioritising of the Towns Fund projects. The Council would provide information on costs, deliverability and outline implications for the programme of activity so that the Board can develop and implement an affordable delivery plan. The Board are stakeholders groups and have involved both interested and impacted parties from Stocksbridge, along with interest groups from outside the town. Throughout the development stage of each project, when funding and approvals are confirmed, the Board will need to determine how best to engage with the community and wider stakeholders should changes to the programme need to be made. Your second question. The board will be provided, you said something, sorry. The Board will be provided with information in respect to costs, deliverability and benefit cost ratios to help them programme the decisions. No further consultation is planned at this time, but will take place in course. The funding submission to Government earlier this year required the development of outlined project specifications and cost estimates. Most recent cost estimates being finalised that they have identified cost pressures against a number of the projects. The Towns Fund Board have been briefed throughout the process and will determine the engagement approach going forward. Your answer to D. As with all regeneration programmes, changes to the projects might have to be considered to manage the budgets and the outcomes. Any such removal of changes for the Trails project need to be considered by the Board in due course. Your question on E on the Warncliffe estate. As the projects are awaiting funding confirmation and approval, they remain at the concept stage. Therefore, no agreements of works have progressed on any of the projects and won't until funding is confirmed and all approvals are achieved. Your answer to F on the SYMCA or Subtrans, no additional funding for the Trails project has been sought to date. Your next to last answer, an outline business case has not been completed for the Trails project. And to your final question, as the accountable body, the Council is responsible for the correct use of public funds and compliance with associated guidance issued by the Government. As part of this role, the Council will support the Board in making decisions in respect of its programme. The Council has representation on the Board and has the ability to contribute to the decision making through this route. I'll get a copy of all of them out to you, so I'll give you a chance to peruse them, and then if you need to, obviously come back on some of that. Thank you. Can I thank you for your time today? Much appreciated.
I didn't get an answer to A. What are the projects that are being proposed for pausing? That wasn't. I didn't hear that at all. I don't know if anyone else heard, but I didn't.
I thought I did, but anyway, I'll repeat it. Okay. So, to A, can officers clarify which projects? The Towns Fund Board are responsible for commissioning and prioritising the Towns Fund projects. The Council will provide information on costs, deliverability and outline implications for the programme of activity so that the Board can develop and implement an affordable delivery plan. The Board are stakeholders. The Board are a stakeholders group and have involved both interested and impacted parties from Stocksbridge, along with interest groups from outside the town. Throughout the development stage of each project, when funding and approvals are confirmed, the Board will need to determine how best to engage with the community and wider stakeholders should changes to the programme need to be made.
That doesn't list the projects, and there has been no stakeholder engagement since July, just to say.
We'll get into it. Thank you. Anyway, thank you. Okay, thank you for that. The next item is item 7, retirement of staff. There's a list of employees here. quite considerable. Can we place on record the appreciation and the valuable services rendered to the City Council by the members of staff, extend them the best wishes for their future and a long and happy retirement, and direct that the appropriate extract of the resolution now made under the Common Seal of the Council be forwarded to those staffs. Can we agree those? Agreed? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Next item is item 8, work programme.
Good afternoon, everyone. On the main agenda pack on page 27, if you could leave to there, it sets out the forward plan for this committee. What I would like to do is draw your attention to the set of recommendations at the top of page 28, because that's what we'll be asking the committee to agree. I'd just like to draw further attention to section 2, which has some references from council or other committees. And then moving through, if we look at appendix 1, we've got proposed additions and amendments to the work programme since the last meeting. That's on page 31. Moving on to page 32, and then from page 33 onwards, you've got the work programmes moving forwards for the forthcoming meetings. So what we'll be asking is for the recommendations to be agreed, which are listed at the top of page 28. So I'll pass back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions or comments on the work programme? If not, can we agree those? Thank you. Thanks ever so much. Over to item 9, Stocksbridge Towns Fund. Howard, Ben, yourselves?
Hi, Terry. Okay. I think probably the report's not particularly contentious. We're here to ask approval from committee to accept the funding that's been made available. That's 9 out of the 10 projects. At the time of writing, I think it was 7. So there's 1 outstanding. We don't believe there's any issue. It's just there's a bottleneck with analysts at Treasury. And on gaining, we hope, approval to accept the funding, then we'll be able to continue with the design and development process of each of the 9, maybe 10 projects. Probably 2 things that are worth just highlighting to committee, just how we're going to manage any capital potential liabilities and also the revenue potential liabilities. So it's a nearly £24 million capital programme. We have 15% contingency across the programme to hopefully combat any inflationary or price tender cost, because these are all concepts at the moment. We've not gone to market to understand what we can afford to actually do. And obviously with inflation running as it is, that's quite a concern. I think one of the measures that we'll certainly put in place, and we're working with the finance team, is just to ensure that each project can be scaled. So we've got the ability to reduce scope, change scope, value engineer where necessary. Or even if things on particular projects get critical, we don't actually even have to progress with those projects, but we'll be working with the Towns Fund Board as the decision maker here to understand sort of the priorities and where we can move things if we need to. I think on the positive side, the report also states that we're looking to get an additional £3 million worth of funding from the MCA. Probably 2 of the £3 million will provide headroom to be able to also combat inflationary pressures or even project creeps or things that we don't know about. So I think, as you know, speaking on behalf of the Towns Fund Board, I think we're still confident that we can deliver the full suite of projects, but we've got to step through the tender process and do that in batches just to manage any sort of risk that costs might come back and unachievable. Regarding revenue costs, I think there's 1 main potential revenue liability for members to be aware of, and that's the development of the community hub building. So this is a 2.5-storey, so 20,000 square foot new building on the High Street in Stocksbridge. We've got funding to prove the concept to establish a managed workspace and an education service in that building. It will also house a new library service and some flexible rentable community space. So the Towns Fund programme has got 2 years worth of monies to prove the concept for those services to run from the High Street. And beyond that, the council would be liable at a very worst case up to £400,000 a year to run the building if it was under market rents at 25% occupancy. That's roughly what we're anticipating that cost to be. However, we've probably got 4 years from now to understand how close we are to that risk, and there's certain mitigations and measures we can put in place, which is changing use, even selling it. So we, as a key plank of the regeneration activity on the high street and the accelerator really for what we're wanting to do along with the shop frontage scheme, we are recommending that we sort of move ahead and manage that risk, but manage it actively and ensure the council doesn't get any revenue or capital liabilities as the programme and the projects sort of progress to delivery. So I think, unless there's any other questions, that's probably in summary why we're here.
Thanks, Howard. Any questions? Mick, Douglas, Joe? Right, okay, just keep your hands up. Yeah, okay. Mick, then Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. One is a question on one of the projects, which is the bus service project. Given the experiences we've had in recent times with buses, I'm just wondering whether or not this is still doable. The other is something that's nagging away at me after Mr. Ogden's questions is, are we being asked today to endorse just the receipt of the money and the council acting as a accountable body, or are we being asked to give our consent or agreement to the possible exclusion of certain projects? That's what I'm not quite clear about, because I don't think, personally, that Mr. Ogden, and I don't know where the answers came from, I don't think he got proper answers to the questions about what's being excluded and why. So I'm a bit, if somebody could clarify whether I'm being asked to agree the non-inclusion of certain projects or not.
Thanks, Mick. Howard, do you want to answer?
Oh, yeah, okay. So first question first then, regarding the bus service. I think we've got about £775,000 worth of funding. So capital, like a capital grant is going to be made available through an expressions of interest process where operators can come and provide and bid for the money and design a service to link some of the more isolated communities in Stocksbridge and up on the valley side up to the high streets and some healthcare services. So we understand from the consultation that's been extensive and a bus survey that was done previously and another one that will be done, that there is the demand there, but it's again a pump prime amount of funding to give it enough shelter to be able to get the fare box up to a critical mass in about 3 to 4 years, in the hope then it will be commercially sustainable. And I think you've alluded to some of the issues regarding bus service provision. I think Stocksbridge particularly looks like it's going to be hit by that. We actually think that in terms of this service might actually assist it in terms of it being sustainable. So the money, that's the one project that we're still waiting on confirmation for from Treasury. We think there's no issue with it, it's just a timing issue, and we should hopefully be able to get that sort of contracted in the next 3 to 4 months and operating, and then it'll have to prove its sort of viability. Second question was regarding the endorsement and prioritisation things. So the Towns Fund Board have commissioned these projects. We're a member of the Towns Fund Board and have got some influence through having membership of that board. I think we're sat here today as being the accountable body for the funding. So it's actually, I think the ask is we want authority to be able to accept the funding that's been offered, and then the Towns Fund Board will then go and commission or will go steer the commissions of the projects. So I think that's going to be the next piece of work the Towns Fund Board needs to understand, and a lot of that's going to have to be done through going to the market to understand if actually the ambition and the specifications of the project can be afforded and delivered by the market. So it's the Towns Fund Board that will make those decisions, with us being a member of that. This committee, we're asking for it to be the accountable body and accept the funding to allow the Towns Fund Board to do that. So it's a bit complex, but that's the ask.
Okay, mate.
I think that's answered my question. So in effect, it's down to the board in Stocksbridge
Yeah,
to make that decision.
Yeah, so...
And we are not endorsing anything that they may or may not decide.
So we're responsible for delivering the town's investment plan, which have got these projects in, and to be the accountable body for the funding and the delivery of that. So it's down now for the board. Now we're still waiting formal confirmation for the funding from Treasury, but we know it's on the way. As soon as we get that, we can then go to market. We can develop these a bit further, then go to market, and that's going to be the next number of months of work with the Towns Fund board to understand when and where they want to go and how they want to go. So yeah, hopefully that's answered your question.
Martin?
Thank you, Chair. One of my questions has already been asked by Councillor Rooney. The other one was around governance. A quick question. So you've mentioned the Town's Fund Board, and the report talks about a town deal board. Is that the same thing?
Sorry, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's...
So how does the governance process work? And can you assure us that the right levels of probity are built into that? Because I don't know who's appointed the Towns Fund Board. We're a member of it, but they can make the decisions, but we've got the financial liability if they get it wrong. So how does that all work? And how can you assure us that our liabilities are being discharged appropriately?
David?
It's one of those where the governance has been set up by the government for the funding. So the Town's Fund Board is the commissioner, but even though they might make the commissioning decision, the implementation will go through council processes. So we will have the final say on how those are implemented and any decisions around risk.
So if I've understood that correctly, we can say how they're implemented, but with reference to the previous question, we can't determine what is implemented. Thank you.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Martin. Douglas?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. I have a feeling that we're all on the same page here about asking questions about governance, and follows on very neatly from what Councillor Rooney was saying and what Councillor Smith said. I think it's obviously a substantial amount of money from government, and that's welcomed. It's been delivered through quite an arm's length issue there, and I think we're probably coming to where we say we perhaps do need some further reassurances about the governance structure and just making sure we're okay with this. And I just want to ask, because I mean, I think with this, we know it's Stocksbridge. Councillor Grocott isn't here today. But as you understand it, it's very much linked with the government drive to put money through individual named MPs in the area. And as I understand, it's the MP's husband who's a very influential member of the board. I don't think that's a particular secret. And then Councillor Fox referred to, in the prepared answer, talked about the interested parties on the board. And this also includes Mr. Dransfield, the big proper businessman and property owner there. And I mean, just for me, it seems we've got conflicts of interest popping out all over the place here. And it's not to say that there's anything improper at all about this. But the question is really, have we got a good enough governance structure to cover this? And do we need a kind of heightened amount of due diligence? Just because, we've got £24 million. This is great, but it's also £24 million that can go wrong. And just anticipating, the newspaper headlines will be in 3 years' time. Just can we have some reassurance there? And really my question is there enough resource from this money going in to ensure that actually we are properly resourced internally within the council to ensure that governance is done? I don't want to be in a position where, things have got through the governance because actually we don't have enough staff in here to keep a very careful and close eye on, so that everyone can be reassured about this. And especially in the community of Stocksbridge, just bearing in mind, what we've been told this afternoon about there's been no consultation since July, which is a bit at odds with what's in the report where it says throughout 2022. So you can see where I'm coming from with concerns there. So I think Chief Exec.
Thanks, Douglas. I'm going to bring Kate in.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Some really helpful questions. Just to put some context around this. So the Towns Fund is part of the national portfolio for the Levelling Up Fund with DLUC, and we have very clear guidance in terms of how we have to set up Towns Fund boards, in terms of the membership. In terms of MP's involvement, each Town Fund's project has to be sponsored by an MP to be supported, similar to how we have Levelling Up Funds round 1 and 2 as well. And again, they are prescribed in terms of how the partnership boards are set up. In front of you today is what you've got is a report as Howard set out to ask for our agreement for £24.1 million worth of Towns Fund grant to be secured by the council to then, as per the guidance for that funding, to be administered through the Towns Fund governance structure and board. And the second part of the report is also noting that £3 million has been secured and submitted as part of the Gain Share programme with the South Yorkshire MCA as well as a contribution. And that's made up of £2 million for the Manchester Road placemaking and £1 million worth for the community hub as well. And again, the report details how that may be secured moving forward. There are some additions under items 3 and 4 which make recommendations around variations in the capital programme, which is reported through this route as well. So just to be clear to the board that we would act as the accountable body, we are required to administer through the Towns Fund programme and board arrangements. The MP is the sponsor for that funding as well. All commissioning goes through that board. We have a number of seats on that board as prescribed, as well as other commercial and other local partners as well. And clearly we can continue to bring updates through this committee and through our usual sort of programme arrangements as well as part of that. But I hope that helps at least put some context around the report and how we're bringing this forward.
I'll just add that I'm very happy to provide. Oh God, we can provide perhaps an update briefing on how conflicts of interest are managed. It's a constituted board. It'll have a governance and conflicts of interest policies, so we can provide a briefing on that. There's obviously we're doing everything we can to in line with our responsibilities to ensure that's all. Proper, as Kate said, the requirement for this to go through a board of this sort is in the written into the funding. I don't know if Howard wants to say anything more about consultation, because I think that equally we could provide a briefing about all of the consultation events that have happened across Stocksbridge over the past year, because I'm aware just from having seen photos of them that some have happened since July.
Thanks, Kate.
Do you want me to comment, Douglas? So on the specific point Kate made there, so I think what perhaps you're alluding to, or maybe Simon's sort of comments regarding, is we've been developing these projects in detail for actually quite a long period, an elongated period, because actually there has been some historic issues with interests, which we've managed to work with the board to sort out, but it had caused some delay. You mentioned a certain party there who was involved, who now isn't involved, and I think that's been quite beneficial in terms of the culture of the group. We had to sign off the bids in July for submission to DLUC in August. So because this is all externally funded and the development works at the risk of the council, as soon as the work was completed on the commissions, we paused everything, so we weren't burning money on fees or any further commissioning work until, and that will restart when funding's confirmed and received in the new year. So I think my perspective on it would be the stakeholder group that we are working with is the Towns Fund Board. It's got democratic representation in the form of Julie and Miriam Cates, the local MP, and is made up nearly completely of local residents and local businesses. So we've been working with them, but actually there was a deliberate decision by the board to pause and not spend any money on any further work or any further discussions, because there was nothing really else to talk about until we receive the funding. So there has been sort of extensive consultation. We have met with as a Towns Fund board, but we've not really had any work to do or consult on, because we're waiting for the funding announcement, which is pending.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Douglas. Douglas?
No, I mean, thanks for those answers. I suppose my question is really just, have we got enough resource in here? I mean, so that presupposes the question, do we recognise there is possibly a need for perhaps some heightened scrutiny of this? I suppose I'm a little concerned that, you know, even with additional briefings, which might be useful and I'm sure be welcomed, it's probably unrealistic to expect this committee to keep a close eye on the operation of this. Would it be helpful to have, you know, something like making sure that all the proceedings of the separate board, the town's board, are placed on a website so they can be open to public scrutiny in the interest of that transparency, because I can see us constantly heading off that sort of complaint.
Yeah, that is a requirement. We do that. So, and actually, new guidance has recently come out which strengthens a load of things. I mean, a lot of the Towns Fund work and the deal at work's been sort of developed in flight, so to speak. So, as the funding's dropping across the Towns Fund boards, government are providing far more guidance in terms of getting agendas out early, publishing minutes and details after the meeting, and we're doing our utmost to ensure that's done. And we are scrutinised, and we're regularly asked questions. And from January, we're going to be having evening and weekend drop-in sessions on the high street where, you know, impacted or interested sort of stakeholders or residents and businesses can come and talk to both myself and Amanda, the comms office. So we're really just been waiting for the funding to drop so we can actually then kick on.
Thanks, Simon. I've got David.
Yeah, I mean, Howard's right that we did get something from government that required these boards to tighten up on their governance. So it wasn't just this one. I will say that it was a general missive from government about tightening up on governance. The other thing is this committee or finance sub will have that oversight because each capital project will be going through the normal capital monitoring process.
Yes, I think that's an important point just to follow on from David then. So any revenue project over £50,000, which the two that we have, the three which we have, will come through this group in terms of the issuing of those grants. And then every other project's 100% capital funded and will be reported through, it's going through the capital gateways, which are a very robust process, and reported to this group as well. But that's once we've actually gone and got a lockdown spec that we've costed, and then we can get the full business case together, and then that will be what will come back to this group for endorsement and review.
Thanks, Howard. Thank you. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. So, my questions have partly been answered by this discussion, but I'm going slightly back to what Mr. Aldrin was asking. I mean, I suppose the first thing is, the fact that we've got capital approvals in an appendix here for some of the projects, is that because those are the ones that were chosen by the board as to come for capital approval at this point, or is there some other reason for that?
I think, to be fair, we're trying to be ready for the funding to drop so we can move forward. So we have progressed with capital approvals where they're able to be achieved, and they're all subject to funding anyway. So as I say, some of the work has stopped because we paused everything waiting for the funding. So we've not allowed project managers to pick the work back up and start billing to the projects, because if the project's not confirmed, then the council has to pay for that development work. So I think that was the work that was sort of easy pickings, really. They were the business cases that were the most straightforward, that actually managed to progress as far as they possibly could while we were still sort of being able to charge at the commissioning stage to the fund.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it's a little bit prioritisation by default, isn't it? That these ones were more ready, they happen to be more ready, therefore these are the ones we're getting.
I think I'd say less complex, Joe, probably. The lower value, less complex. No, there's no design at all. We're not prioritising. We're not even making a recommendation in terms of prioritisation. That's what the board will be doing. All we've done is try to cost the specifications through as accurate costing processes as we can without going to market. And then we've turned around and said, we can buy that for this, we think, but we've still got to go through tender. So some of the projects are under pressure.
So the board hasn't had any input into kind of this selection or prioritisation anyway?
No, I mean, the board have asked us to go and try and get outline costs and submit bids for the 10 projects, which we've done. We've got 9 out of the 10 going to come back with confirmed funding in a matter of weeks. The 10th is the bus service, which is still being reviewed. Then we've got to go then we've got to basically go to market. So that's what. So the Towns Fund Board will have to make that prioritisation, because some of the projects require further work and some are over budget, so they're not ready to go to market.
Okay, so thank you for that. So I'm still the thing I'm not clear about. I'm not quite sure what the proper way to ask this is, but obviously you're talking about the board having a role in making the decisions regarding this, and the board being representative of a variety of stakeholders. And we've had a public question from somebody who said stakeholders have not been involved. Now, I don't know if that means he's a different stakeholder, or whether the board hasn't been functioning, or he represents a different group of stakeholders who have somehow been left out by accident or design from the process. Which can you clarify that is?
So I think there were stakeholder meetings held throughout the summer. Simon and the group that Simon represents were involved in that. That stopped when the bids got submitted. So the stakeholder group is the Towns Fund Board, and they represent kind of Stocksbridge. That's who we've been working with and taking the steer from, and they're the commissioners of the projects. They've gone in as they've been submitted in the state the board have signed them off as. So that stakeholder group. So Simon's group has not been involved in the Towns Fund Board because I don't have membership of the Towns Fund Board, I suppose, is the simple answer.
Okay. So I think that's a bit clearer. Okay. Okay. So I've got a final just a question on the nature of the, again, because we've got approvals in front of us of capital projects with ongoing potential revenue liabilities if they don't perform well. Who is then responsible for kind of signing that off as a sound business proposition? Who is responsible for saying, yes, I think the space in the hub will be rented. Yes, I think a reasonable number of people will want to ride these buses. That's going to be what makes it a good project as opposed to a bad one. Because and if it does turn out to be a bad project, does that revenue liability come back to the council on an ongoing basis?
So the bus service project will just finish, so it won't run into a period where it won't get to a state where that would be funded by ourselves or the PT of the Mayor's office. The only one that would have an ongoing liability would be the community hub building. That's fully occupied and let for the initial 2 years by the sheer fact that the Towns Fund Board are paying for a managed workspace to be provided and an education service to be run. We will manage that. Officers in those service areas will manage. So the property officer and the education colleagues will manage along with the service providers where they are in terms of sustainability. And if it looks like they can't achieve that, then we'll have to come back to board and change the use of the building, or sell the building, or do something different with it. So it's kind of proof of concept funding, which has been... Right, but
I would hope, I mean, the council, I'm aware, is involved in a number of kind of office development enterprises which are reliant on occupants and rents coming in. And I'm slightly nervous that we're about to do another one. And I'm saying, oh yes, it'll be fine because we've got plans for the first couple of years, but it's being actually occupied by the body doing it. It's not it's not an external... it's not an external tenant in that sense, and which kind of reminds me of Sorby House all over again, doesn't it? But so, I mean, I want some reassurance on that rather than just saying, it's all fine, we've got it all planned.
So, Joe, I think we've got exit options though from the building. So this is a capital funded project from DLUC. We take ownership of that building, but we don't have to continue with the ownership of that building. So that building can just be released from our estate. There's no liability or clawback or string on us. So this is an opportunity to secure that investment, secure the regeneration lift on the high street, and also to deliver the Towns Fund ambition. And we've done soft market testing, we've done market demand studies that are all independently provided that suggest that there is demand for office accommodation in Stocksbridge. The shortlist down at Fox Valley for occupants, it will also should achieve its rents of like £12 per square foot. So we believe it's going to hit sustainability, and it's got a 2-year kind of buffer to be able to do that. In the case it doesn't, we'll be actively managing where the sort of exit ramp is off this building, and that could be just a sale.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments? If not, thank you, Anne, for team up there. I think what this just shows is the pressure and hurdles it is when we're starting to devolve power down to communities and the issues that they're having to deal with as well with the town's council, stakeholder groups and constituted decision making. So we all faced with the recommendations on top of 48. Can we agree those? Agreed? Anybody against? If not, thank you. Thank you, Anne. Thanks, everyone. On to the next item, item 10.
That's me.
Is that okay? Okay, Kate, you want to kind of lead in with that?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm really pleased today to be presenting this paper. It's an extremely important paper which sets out our response as a council to the Race Equality Commission and restates again our commitment to doing everything we can as a council to contributing to Sheffield being an anti-racist city by 2025 and to Sheffield City Council being an anti-racist organisation. The paper sets out an action plan that aligns to our 3-year improvement plan that's set out in that this committee agreed earlier in the year and recognises that there is a lot of work to do over the next coming years. We know that we need to commit and deliver change both for our staff, for the services that we provide and recognise that we have a very important role as a leader within our city on this issue. To be a credible leader in the city, it's really important that Sheffield City Council sets the highest standards for ourselves. And so you will see in this paper and in the action plan a fairly strong theme of what might feel like somewhat internal sets of actions, but which fundamentally are about us being an anti-racist organisation ourselves and making sure that we can step into this discussion in the city. Knowing that we're doing everything we can ourselves, which is something that the chair of the Race Equality Commission, Kevin Hilton, reinforced when he launched the commission. The report has been developed in the involvement of staff across the council, both at senior levels, right the way through teams, but most importantly, I think, including our staff networks who've had the opportunity to review and challenge our suggestions and ideas. And the action plan that's set out in the appendix, I think, needs to be seen as a living document. We are a wonderfully diverse city. The paper recognises that the 2021 census doesn't have the latest 2021 census data in it. That was released just last week, and we now know that in the city of Sheffield, 25% of our city, of our citizens are from Black, Asian and minoritised ethnic backgrounds, communities. That's up from 19% in 2011, and that's across all ages. So I think we can expect that when we get further breakdown of the census data, that what we'll also see is the younger generations of our city are increasingly diverse, and that's something to celebrate and be incredibly proud of. We know that our organisation is not representative of the city that we serve, especially not at senior levels, and that's something that's mentioned in this plan and in this paper and something we are committed to changing. This is going to be a journey for us as a council, but it's integral to the organisation we want and need to be in order to provide the services that our city needs and to deliver outcomes for all of our people. In terms of oversight and governance, we have a newly refreshed Strategic Equalities and Inclusion Board, which I chair jointly with Ashman Ali, our Exec Director for Operational Services, and which includes membership of elected members from all 3 parties, as well as senior officers across the council and representatives from our staff networks. And we've strengthened our and supported our equalities team, some of whom are in the room today and have done an incredible job on this piece of work, so I'd like to give some credit to them. But we've also made the point that this is everybody's job. This is not just about a committed and expert equalities team at the centre of our organisation, but it's about every single member of our staff and particularly every single person in any sort of leadership role in the organisation, understanding that equalities, inclusion and diversity are all of our responsibility. 2 quick things I'd just like to flag. So looking into the action plan, I won't go into that in detail. You've all had a chance to look at it and happy to answer any specific questions. But you'll see that there are 3 sort of whole council actions and priority areas which underpin everything else in this first year of the plan. And that's reflective of conversations we've had with staff and a recognition that we need to do some important work across the organisation to create the foundations for the change that's discussed. That includes building a more inclusive culture with learning, development and awareness for all staff, and a dedicated programme of work over the next year. Work to de-bias our systems and processes to reduce barriers and inequalities, particularly in HR, procurement and the like, and also a very important work on improving our data collection, sharing and analysis, which is not where it needs to be. I'll finish by just, I wouldn't normally do this, but I think it's quite important to restate the recommendations in the paper, because they require every single person in this room actually to commit themselves personally and collectively to what we're proposing to do. And those recommendations are that we, as a council, need to ensure that all members, senior leaders and staff lead and contribute to our council becoming an anti-racist and inclusive organisation through all we do. And that we are agreeing that we need to commit to real actions to eradicate racism within the council's practice, rather than actions which are performative and unsustainable. I think we need to acknowledge we have a way to go to improve practice for our employees, and I think in the production of this report, it has revealed that there are areas of the council where there is excellent practice, and there are areas of the council where there is a long way to go, and it's our responsibility, my responsibility, to make sure that happens. And then finally, we continue in our role as civic leader, working with anchor institutions, partners and communities to champion equality and lead the city in all we do to tackle racism and racial inequality. That's all I wanted to say, but happy to take questions, and Adele and Bashir are here from the Equalities team for any specific detailed questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Angela?
Thank you, Kate, for the report. It's good to see finally out of this as a first kind of step. There is a lot there to unpack. I was just looking at, well, the figures are now different, obviously, so it's even worse. I understand that we have like an overall number of how many of our employees. I'm on page 17. In terms of workforce, I think representation is very important, and if our employees don't represent the city, we have a big problem. But I think we're missing one slot. I think it's very important to look at middle management, because a lot of our employees stay with us for a very long time. So how do we track how people are promoted internally when they belong, when they are from a BAME background rather than a British white background? I think that is really important, because this is a question I've asked before, and former Councillor Mohammed Maroof used to ask this at Audit and Standard. How many of those middle managers actually are from a non-British white background? Because I think that's really important, because that is how people progress internally, and how do we foster leadership in those groups. And maybe we have to proactively do something to encourage people from those backgrounds to go for those jobs, and to get that promotion. And do we do enough? And can we do something that is proactive rather than wait for people to do it themselves? It's like to do it ourselves until we have that representation, so that then it's more like a level playing field for people.
Thanks, Angela. Yes, I mean, I think a couple of things I'll say there. The first one, I referenced the need for us to get better data. Our data isn't good enough, and that's one of the things that we need to be asking, not just counting people, but also asking questions about what gets in the way, and understanding at a much more granular level where we have barriers. One of the things that comes out very clearly from discussions with our staff race equality network, and to be fair, this comes out when we're discussing many protected characteristics, so it's important to make that point as well. We have a public sector equalities duty and protected characteristics, and this matters for almost all of them. But one of the things that comes out when we're having that conversation is that there have been attempts in the past in the council to provide leadership development training and various opportunities, but that hasn't been coupled with determined effort to de-bias our systems and processes. So that has actually led to more ingrained disappointment and a sense that there is in some cases a bit of a glass ceiling or a concrete ceiling or whatever you want to call it. So we have got to do both things. We've got to debias our systems and we've got to support all of our managers through training and development, education in lots of cases, and in terms of the management, the overall management training we're offering at all levels. And I agree with you, that includes, that goes through to managers and leaders at all levels of the organisation. So we know this is a challenge. It's obvious in the data. It doesn't even really need restating how big a challenge it is. It's obvious when you're in any room. Last week or a few weeks ago, we had our senior leadership away day for all of our managers, and it was a great day, really brilliant discussions around values-based leadership. But we also had lots of colleagues there from our Race Equality Network, and they made the point, which they rightly should and must continue to do without fear of favour until we get this right, that there were an awful lot of white faces in the room and that wasn't representative of the city we serve. So I think the first step is talking about it, and the second step is making sure that we're really supporting our colleagues to build their capability, confidence, and then secondly, as I say, debiasing systems. So I don't know if there's anything. Adele, I don't know if you want to say anything. If you want to come to the table, please do. Sorry, Adele's team have done awful.
No, I think the only thing I would say is on that, we do this week actually, we're bringing a report on the workforce data to the Strategic Equality and Inclusion Board, and that has a detailed breakdown in terms of the different grades of staff and how progression is working and where people have got an extra responsibility on top of their job and how that is broken down into different protected characteristics. And as Kate has already said, that does highlight where there are issues at middle management, etc. And that report will come back when it's finalised, as it did last year, to scrutiny. It will come back to this committee after Christmas once we've got it finalised.
Thanks, Angela. Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A comment rather than a question. It's an excellent report. The last meeting of the Economic Development Committee, officers presented a really excellent report going into more detail on one of the recommendations, number 7. Won't go into the detail there, but what we were able to do is to take just the very first steps in trying to address some of the issues there. So I'd just recommend every committee represented here to do likewise, because it worked really well. And as I said, first steps, but good way of doing it. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Joe?
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I mean, it's a bit. We've been waiting a little while for this. I remember we got a couple of holding reports in the summer. I'm struck by the conversation that's just had in response to Councillor Genzio's question, in that it felt a little bit franker to me than the wording in the document. And I do wonder. I mean, I was going to say thank you for repeating the recommendation, the committing to real actions that will eradicate racism rather than actions which are performative and unsustainable. And I am struck by how many of the actions, because there are lots of actions in here, are developing more policies, reviewing existing policies, developing action plans, having more conversations. And so my question, playing devil's advocate for a moment, if you'll forgive me, is how many of those actions are performative and unsustainable as opposed to real? And what is the real test of a real action?
Thanks, Joe. Firstly, I apologise for the delay in this paper coming forward. I think, as I alluded, and I'll say it very plainly, it isn't a reflection of the work of the Equalities team, who've worked really very hard on this. We've had a conversation at the Strategic Leadership team and reflected on the fact that it has been far too hard for the Equalities team to pull this report together, and that is in and of itself an example of what needs to change in the organisation. As I say, there are a number of areas where the culture shift we are talking about is all managers and leaders recognising that there are some things which are everybody's job, and this is one of those. So I think we've got there. I would have preferred us to have got there sooner, but I'm happy that the work that what we have pulled together is sustainable. What makes a good action? We could have a whole discussion about that. I think you know, the key point. Ideally, we would have smart actions in here, and I think in lots of cases they are. But it is the case that we are talking about culture change, and in order to change the culture of an organisation of 8,000 people, we have to get into discussions about education and training and development, and we have to dig in to some of the structural and systemic barriers that exist, sometimes in the way policies are written and sometimes in the way policies are implemented. So I think it's a good challenge. As Martin's mentioned, I think it would be really, really helpful if individual policy committees would ask to have dedicated sessions on their work programmes to look into the specific elements of either their policy areas or indeed the large workforces that apply to their committees. And to push us and challenge us on this. And I sincerely hope that the next time we bring an update on this, that we'll have some of the actions here which talk about developing a plan will have a bit more substance to them.
Thanks. Any more questions? Comment? If not, first of all, can I just put a comment out there and just say thank you to everybody who were involved in this, commissioners, the chair, Kevin, to the team, the staff, also to our unions, the networks that have all inputted into a report and an opportunity to really get to these recommendations and get that delivery, which is in our delivery plan as well, and obviously be embedded into everything we do. And I hope that the anchor organisations, that we become a good comparator in front of them as well to take them along. So a big thank you to everyone for that. You've got the recommendations in front of you. Can we agree those recommendations and those action plans? Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks for that. Next item, I'll hand over to you, David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is a matter that went on the agenda when we thought we would be able to be in a position to get a report published. There were still discussions ongoing, so that wasn't possible. And rather than publish a report at the very back end of last week, which we didn't think would give sufficient public notice as well as information for members, I think there's going to be a request that S&R committee defer this matter to next week, to the 12th, and then the report can be published. There is a technicality on that, Chair, in that because that's less than 5 working days away, it will have to be classed as an urgent item. So again, I think, Chair, you can recommend that we deal with it as an urgent item for that day, and I would ask that committee agree to that as well.
Okay, then I'll ask the committee to accept that recommendation and we'll take it as an urgent item. Yeah. Okay, then. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
The report will be published today.
Thank you. Okay, on the next item, then item 12, grant aid. That joint team. Okay, do you want to present yourselves?
Hi, I'm Jo Horrobin, Director of Integrated Commissioning, and this is my colleague Emma Dickinson, who is going to talk to the body of the report. I'll just, by way of introduction, just explain how we've come to this report. This report represents the first stage, really, of a journey to better understand and manage the grants that the Council invests in the voluntary and community sector in the city, and to ensure that we're using that investment to maximum effect and aligned to our city's priorities, as well as bringing together in this report various grants in one place, which is, and it's some time since we've actually done that. The report proposes a more strategic and long-term approach to investment in the sector, and the report directly responds to the Race Equality Commission, the previous agenda item, and addresses some of the immediate pressures facing the city, particularly the cost of living crisis and some of the challenges set out in another agenda item regarding new arrivals in the city. So I'm not going to steal any more of Emma's thunder because she's done all the hard graft on this. So over to you, Emma.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And yes, I'm Emma Dickinson and I work in commissioning as part of Jo's team and predominantly work on grant giving and working with the voluntary sector. So as Jo has said, this is probably one of the first, the most recent that we brought together grants that are invested in the voluntary sector in one place, and I think we were keen that members understood the breadth of our investment in the voluntary sector. I think it's really important at a time that we're moving into the impact of cost of living on individuals, how much that we are working alongside our voluntary sector to support them with communities. The grants that are detailed in this are all due to end at the end of March, and they are very most of them are very long-standing relationships. And I think we should be proud of those really long-standing relationships, you know, such as Citizens Advice, etc. I think, as Joe alluded to, we're hoping to take a more strategic process across the council and work with the voluntary sector in a more coherent approach. That is one of the things that has come out of the REC and other feedback that we've received from voluntary sector organisations, and that we can pull together a grant register, because I'm absolutely aware that a range of members relatively want a good understanding of our investment, and sometimes it can be quite difficult to pull that together. The other thing that we're putting into the grant agreement that hasn't been there, so we're asking for people to acknowledge that, is to actually put a break clause in the grant agreements, so that actually if policy committees change their mind around long-term budgets, that's absolutely there and gives you as chairs in policy committees the ability to do that. And I suppose that I won't go through each grant programme in turn. There's lots of detail in there, but happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Emma. Any questions, comments? Seems a straightforward report. Can we agree? Mick?
It's just something that basically the last thing you said was about policy committees if they want to change budgets. We had a conversation earlier today at the pre-meeting for the governance committee, which was talking about basically disaggregating this budget rather than aggregating it, if that's the right word. So I'm slightly puzzled as to who's got control and where over the spend that is allocated to each of the different committees. Because I thought I was clear until you just said that, but now I'm not, and I'm making the assumption that somebody is performance managing these organisations and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the thing that really concerned me a little bit was the fact that there doesn't appear to be any room for newcomers. And that's a criticism that was levelled at this funding regime in the past, that it was the same old faces getting the money and no new ones were allowed in the tent.
Cheers, Mick.
Sorry, I'll deal with the first part of that. I'll let Joe and Emma deal with the latter part of that. Decision on grant making, individual grants, is a matter that is delegated to Finance Sub or to Strategy and Resources. That was the clear decision of Governance Committee when we set up the Policy Committee system. So although the budgets might sit within and under a Policy Committee and they are responsible for managing that, if there is an individual grant decision, that sits with either Finance Subcommittee or Strategy and Resources. And that is the matter that we are going to take to Governance Committee to discuss whether that is still the right thing to do. Won't prejudge it, Mick, but that is the thing that we're taking to Governance Committee to have a review of and decide whether that is still the right thing, that individual grant awards are reserved to Finance Subcommittee. It will probably still remain an option that S&R can take grant decisions and set strategy if it's still cross-cutting or of strategic importance, and that might remain an option from that discussion. But that's where we are at the moment.
We never make anything simple, do we?
But we're trying to make it simpler.
Thank you. I've got Richard, Mick and, Richard, Shafak and Douglas. Richard?
Thank you, Chair. I think the voluntary sector will really welcome this. My discussions with them, they've always come up with the fact it's very difficult to plan on a one-year basis, and at the moment they are really suffering in a lot of sectors because of a shortage of workforce, and that's primarily because a lot of that workforce don't know if they're going to have a job next year. This will go a long way to help that out. I'm also very pleased that there is the break clause, because unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe the government's position has changed. So they're still giving us money on a drip basis. But I think sometimes we have to just be a bit grown up. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Richard. Shafak?
I think mine question kind of follows from Councillor McRooney's. So, for example, over the weekend, I had representations to say that the advice service that's getting £827,895 is not really working for some parts of the city because they've moved during COVID to an entire online presence as opposed to face-to-face. And the people coming round to our house asking us to sign the petition are basically wanting face-to-face advice. And if it can't be delivered here, they are wanting to tap into, I would say, very localised funding that is not really designed for year-on-year stuff. And basically, so the financial stuff may well go through the finance committee, but actually it's what about the how we spend it and how do we get people to influence it? Because that, for me, if we just give CAB £800,000 plus, how do we check back that it's actually working, particularly given it's under the banner of cost of living, and at the moment people, let's be honest, that's where I started my voluntary life, volunteering at Tinsley Advice Service, and the amount of money that we were able to put into people's pockets was phenomenal, but that was because they came through the door. Now, if people aren't coming through the door and they're not accessing online, who's monitoring that? And I just happen to live in that area. I'm sure there's other communities across the board that may also have those sort of issues.
Thanks, Shafak. Joe, Emma?
Thank you. It's a really useful challenge and helpful. I'd really like to just take some of the detail of that offline so we can talk it through and understand it more. That's within my team. I've recently inherited that team, so I'm just learning more about that element. And it's something that I'm working with the CEO of CAB directly with to understand how they do support vulnerable communities that don't access their online offer. I think it's a really relevant point, and absolutely I really welcome when people do have feedbacks as such as that to bring it forward and for us to understand it more. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll message. Thank you.
And I would just add to that, if that's okay, that we know that Citizens Advice Bureau had to make a very, very rapid shift in order to move online during the pandemic. And one of the challenges they face now is that some of their funding has been through one-off grants from things like Big Lottery, and that they no longer have some of those grants and some of those contracts, such as a DWP one, I believe, and as a result they have lost some scale. So 800,000 might sound like a lot, but it's actually, they are increasingly having to rely on volunteers. So there's a cost balancing exercise, and that's not to say that they shouldn't and can't provide face-to-face, but I think we have to acknowledge that our envelope hasn't changed. In fact, their overall envelope has shrunk, and they are trying to manage costs and relying increasingly on volunteers. So, I think the degree of certainty, the degree of certainty that we are recommending here will enable them to make stronger, more robust plans, really, including addressing some of the concerns that you've raised. I'm conscious we didn't respond to Mick's point. Would you like us? Not this time. So we haven't responded to Councillor Rooney's point, on the challenge around newcomers. to grant funding. And I think it's a really good challenge. And I would describe this, I think I've said as I sort of started this, that this is stage one, where we pull everything together and have a look at what the totality of our investment is, and through which policy areas and into which organisations. So it's that first step, and as Emma set out, and as is slightly confusing in governance terms, that there are break clauses, that we're recommending break clauses, so that as policy committees perhaps look at some more of the detail in these areas, or if Strategy and Resources would like to have further detail, it's entirely possible for us to revisit and look at the funding. And, you know, we will also continue to work with the voluntary sector on optimising other types of income into the sector, and that's one of the conversations that we've got running at the moment, is how could we get an investment pipeline going for the voluntary sector which we would support, and which would enable us to have a bigger pot to spend within the city on the voluntary and community sector.
Thanks, Joe. Douglas?
Did Kate want to go first?
Very quick point. Sorry, Chair, apologies, but I do think it's worth just making the point that one of the things, so to kind of add on to all the things Joe said about citizens' advice locally, these are challenges that they're facing nationally, but they do recognise, I had a meeting with the Chief Executive of Citizens' Advice nationally a few weeks ago, and they really recognise what a special setup we have in Sheffield. This is one of their biggest single organisations, partly as a result of historic arrangements of this council and the way that this council prioritised the importance of advice. So I think we need to see this as an opportunity within some very tight constraints to have a conversation with them and work in partnership with them about how they can deliver what the city needs. Because as I say, Shafak, I think we're all hearing lots of examples of just how important that face-to-face advice is for people facing real challenges at the moment. So I think we have a good opportunity there, is all I wanted to say, if we use this certainty to drive those conversations. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Douglas?
Thanks. I was just going to say this. I thought the conversation was veering towards more of governance about how grants will be allocated in the future, but just to research today, we're just looking at awarding these, and I just want to say completely support these. And just how much recognise that these grants will help lever in significant more amounts of both money to the city, but also people. And if we're talking about the cost of living and engagement with the public, and reaching out there, and right across to things like a homelessness prevention strategy, which we're looking at, these grants are really key. So really happy to pass these off today.
Thank you, Douglas. Any more questions, comments? If not, just want to underline that, and certainly underline what Shafak said about the money that this puts back into our communities if we get this right, that the assistance and that intervention prevention that we do. And I know it's hundreds of thousands of pounds through CABs that they do deliver, but a plea is to get face-to-face in our communities in the manner they've exited totally from us. So there's, if anything, there's a public plea to get back into our communities face-to-face with many of our residents. So, but totally support this. Recommendations are on. Can we agree those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. Thanks, sir. Next item is item 13, asylum dispersal. Is Jason, is that yours? And Beth?
Afternoon, everybody. On a similar theme, I guess, or running along a similar theme, the purpose of this particular report, the background to this is that the government have made provision for an asylum dispersal grant. Sorry, I'll introduce myself first, Terry. Sorry, Chair. Jason Siddall, Head of Communities.
I'm Beth Storm, I'm a Strategic Lead for Asylum and Migration. Good afternoon, everybody.
That's my fault because I know most of the people around the room, sorry. Yeah, so carrying on, the Government have made provision for asylum dispersal grants to be paid to local authorities, along with some additional funding to recognise the contribution and long-standing support of local authorities accommodating asylum seekers. So the purpose of this report is to seek endorsement by the committee of the proposed allocation of funding for this particular grant. Members of the committee, I'm sure you've read the report, but you will see that on pages 5 and 6 there are details there in terms of the recommendations, so the numbers in terms of the overall grant that we're recommending. Just to give you some of the background to this, we, the council, received, I guess, a windfall payment from the government earlier this year in recognition of the work that we've done as a noted city of sanctuary. We received £300,000, which we've already got in the bank, so to speak. On top of that, the government announced new dispersal arrangements so that local authorities would start to receive £3,500 per dispersed bed space in the city. That essentially, this year, based on estimates and what we already know in terms of the accommodation that we've provided so far, will give us a further £353,000. So a total of £653,500 is available. And the recommendations in the report, as I've said on pages 5 and 6, there are details there that are essentially what we are recommending the committee endorse in terms of spending that money. Just to go quickly over those, we've got a small team of staff that doesn't have funding beyond March 23 to manage this particular function in the council. So we're recommending that some of the grant is given over to paying for those staff next year and the year after. We want to support our identified partners who provide strategically important work in the city in this space. And we also want to provide for an open grant pot, which will give other organisations, voluntary sector organisations in this city the opportunity to bid into that for the important work that they do in the city to help this particular cohort. I guess essentially that's it. So myself and Beth will take any questions that the committee have got on this.
Thank you. Thanks, Shafai.
So just going to your 214,000 open grant, I mean, when are we likely to have that going live? And will we have a maximum level of grant, or if somebody came in and said, I want 100,000, what would you do?
Yeah. Well, I guess at this point in time, the honest answer to that is we've not developed that further yet. We're seeking approval for that open grant pot, and we will then work with colleagues who've left now in the voluntary sector liaison team in Joe's bit of the world to design that open grant pot round. So Beth will be working with Emma Dickinson on that in terms of what that actually looks like. So the honest answer is that I can't give you the detail around that because we've not worked all of that detail up just yet.
My intention, Councillor, is to try and get that up and running by the start of the new financial year, if not sooner.
Okay.
That's subject, obviously, to agreement today, along with working out, as Jason's outlined, that process. But that's also part of the reason behind the recommendation asking to ring fence, because we recognise that realistically we can't make sufficiently good use of this money in the current financial year, given how late we are in the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions, comments? If not, can we agree those recommendations? Agreed? No one against? Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next item, item 14. That you, Jason. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Jason Deach, Head of Democratic Services at Council. This item was just to report on the relaunch of our what we call civic honours or civic awards in the city. So at the moment, we have Lord Mayor's Civic Awards, we have Sheffield Legends, and we have Freedom of the City. And what we wanted to do was to make sure we've got a clear way for people to nominate somebody who's made a special contribution to life in our city and to celebrate their achievements. And we also want to make sure there's a very clear criteria and a clear decision-making process for anyone who
receives an honour of this kind, make sure it's very open for everyone to understand. We also wanted to make sure there's a range of awards through which we can recognise and celebrate people's achievements and say thank you to people in the city. In addition, we want to establish awards for council employees. That's something we think isn't a part of our process of recognition at the moment, so we want to do some work on that. The report itself outlines some proposals that a cross-member working group has been looking at, so really it's their work, together with officers who have been looking at this. It's relatively high level at the moment, but we want to do some further work on it, and we want to make sure we clearly define the criteria, so focus is on common understanding of those. We want to work more clearly on an inclusive process for nomination, do some work on the establishment and recruitment of the awards panel that's going to oversee this, and then bring a report back to you which gives more detail on the timeline for this, criteria and the nominations process. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jason. I'm so glad to bring this here and get a policy on this. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. By complete coincidence, just before I got this report, I was approached by an organisation with some questions about how they went about nominating somebody for a civic award. Can they still do that? Can I tell them they can still do that whilst we're going through this relaunch process?
Might not get decided. So I think the best thing would be to write to the Lord Mayor's office at this stage, and we can make sure that they're part of this process going forward. So we'll collect anything. At the moment it's lacking, but we can collect anything so that the awards panel's got that.
Thanks, Jason. Angela? Yeah, and then Brian.
Thanks, Jason. I think it's really good that we have some clarity about the process, and I think it's important to have something that is, it's a proper policy, because at the moment it feels like nobody knows what's happening, and I think it's good to relaunch it. Would it be possible, on 3.5 it says that we don't actually have a list of who has freedom of the city? Could we do some digging and get a definite list so that we know what kind of names are out there? We know a few, but not many. And also, it would be good to have some kind of clarity about who the Civic Award panel are and how we get people onto that. Does it have to be just elected members? Could it be people from the community? Could it be stakeholders, partners, whatever? And as at the moment, I think it's really important to have a definite kind of structure before we make any decisions. So if people are wanting to nominate someone, we know how to do that. So yeah, thank you. But I think it would be good to just have because here it says freedom of the city should be used for the most exceptional contributions, usually of international or historical significance, in line with the Local Government Act, etc. So someone who's persons of distinction and person who have, in the opinion of the authority, rendered an eminent service to that area. So I would like to understand how we've given it before and how we're doing that in the future, including, quite near future. Thank you.
Do you want to take that, Jason? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the list of people who have had the freedom of the city in the past, we can certainly make sure that's available on the website. One of the suggestions is that we make sure it's open and accessible, and also to have a physical roll of honour or something in the town hall where people visiting the town hall can actually see that, and that's evidenced in some way. At the moment, the freedom of the city is in a book, and the book is not available for the public to look at. So that's a good point. And I think one of the opportunities here is to actually make sure we're more open about how that happens and what the criteria are, and we're sharing that with people as well. And I think in terms of the makeup of the panel, there's a real chance for us now, particularly the work that we talked about earlier,
that's happening, to actually make sure that's properly representative, and it's actually, you know, if we're having a certain set of criteria for the awards, we're actually being able to have people on that panel that can reflect that and actually make a judgment and recommendations on that basis. Thanks.
Thanks, Douglas. I think Caltun used to be, I don't know if we've replaced Caltun on that panel. Douglas?
Thanks. Yeah, we perhaps need to get into this. After that, I'm struggling a bit to work out what's going on with this paper, because it just looks like a work in progress, really. And I know that we're expecting a further report, but I'm just wondering what we can really do with this at the moment. I mean, there's so much it doesn't tell us, apart from, you know, what we do know, that, you know, there's a complete lack of diversity, the current system isn't working. But in terms of reference, whoever's on the Civic Awards panel, I mean, does anyone know who's on that? Oh, we see, we haven't got one. Okay. Right. Okay. No. Okay. All right. Well, so I suppose that's the model here. Is about, you know, what's the existing process now, which is part this describes, and what do we need in the future? How are we going to get there? Yeah.
Kate, do you want to come in?
I'll take that. I'm gonna run with the theme of being really blunt today on various things. So the reality is that there hasn't been I think a clear, consistent and good enough process, and I think we owe a debt of gratitude to a team of former Lord Mayors and the current Lord Mayor who have really persistently pushed on us getting on, and this is something that we absolutely need to get in place. So to answer your question, Douglas, I think if the committee's content with what's proposed here, then we will be able to rapidly get on with with providing the further detail. Our recommendation would be to seek to recruit a committee that are diverse and representative of the city we serve, and perhaps to keep a bit of line in the sand between elected members and that panel, actually, so that there's an element of it being really, feeling quite independent. And the only other thing I'd say is you'll note, you're asked to note the proposals in respect of employee awards. We know that as Sheffield, as South Yorkshire people, we don't like to shout about ourselves, but we need to do an awful lot more of it. There are some brilliant staff, some brilliant things going on, and amazing things happening in the city. And as a leader, we should be leading the way in terms of saying thank you.
Thank you for your bluntness, Kate.
Thanks. I mean, I think it's encouraging, you know, because we do need, and we're just saying that, you know, we could really make use of a good employee awards system. It's just that when's we going to get something that we can actually look at, make a decision on? Any idea?
I think they're all ready to go. There's the panel of ex-Lord Mayors who are crying out for this to move on, so that give them the nod, and then we can move on and get the cross-party agreement across the piece. It has felt very ad hoc in the past, and certainly since I've become leader, I'm quite happy to add it out to a committee to agree the awards across the city and get a diverse view. And the one thing we haven't done is each month we take a number of employee and retired staff, 40, 45, 50 years service, and we recognise them on the scroll, but there are other ways of recognising their involvement in this organisation and above and beyond, and we need to get on with it, in my view. But yeah, as soon as we can agree this, Douglas, we can get on with it and get some timescales for everybody. Is that okay? Joe?
Well, sorry to delay it any longer. Yeah, I think I welcome this report. I'm going to agree to it. I think the comment I would make, that I think possibly the officers are always too polite to say, and it's partly in response to what the Greens have said, is that my understanding is that these rewards are not generally for political figures, that they are generally for the citizens, that it's exceptional that a political figure would get one of these, and if they are, I think we should understand that that should be on a cross-party basis, cross-party agreement, which is what I understand we have in the near future, as was referred to. I suppose I would float, and it's just a float at this point, don't do anything with it, slap me down, that if we were wanting to recognise members, then the correct vehicle is the honorary alderman position, which, again, this council doesn't use, but it could adopt, and it could have a system for saying, you know, every 3 years each group gets one according to their size, or so, you know, some formula like the Lord Mayor's formula for handing them out. Because I think we probably all have slightly better views of our own members than we do of members of other groups. That's probably the way to do that.
I like you, Joe.
And the advantage of that is if it might encourage some of the more long-standing members with more venerable service to retire when perhaps they should.
Good call, Joe. I think we know to them. Brian, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's a comment, really. I mean, I remember when the Sheffield legends came in. I think it was there was a campaign. I think it was Gordon Banks that there was a move to give Gordon Banks the freedom of the city, and it was felt there was nothing between the freedom of the city and recognition. And I think when we brought in the legends, it was moved in that way, but it seemed to lose direction a little bit, I think, over the years. So I think it's good to have a proper structure in place in this, and especially I particularly like the thing about for employees, because as you said there, Chair, we recognise people when they leave. They say, well done, you've been here 40 years, bye. And we don't sort of recognise people for what they do during there. So I think it's good to have that in there, and recognising the work that's gone on, particularly in the last 12 years or more, when you see that as the council has thinned out on the officers and the number of people we've got there, but people are still working as hard as they were and trying to deliver to the same level for the city. So I think it's important we recognise that. And Joe, if you're thinking of members, there's always, you can go through the sort of the LGA sort of things where they put members through there. I know I put forward Joan Barton a few years ago, and she was successful in being recognised there. And I think that's one where it's with your peers that they look at things. So I think that's more appropriate than doing it in the city, because otherwise it looks, you know, you don't do it for self-gratification and sort of things here. You know? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, everybody. With those, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just... it all sounds good. Yeah, there's a piece of work to be done. Let's get on with it, as long as I don't have to do it myself. I suppose I'm just a bit anxious about the idea about approving the existing awards criteria when we've all just agreed that they're not up for not good enough. You know, it's recommendation 2. I mean, I'm just unhappy about supporting that, frankly.
I understand where you are. I'm going to put it to a vote because I need to move this to a...
Can I just... I think existing is wrong in there. And I think, Jason, it's to approve the outline awards criteria as set out in the appendix. So I think that's a cut and paste error. And it's probably mine, because I'll not blame Jason, because I did the final recommendation. So I'll own up to that one. So if we can just...
No award for you, David.
No. So if we can take out existing. Good spot, Douglas.
Is that, are we okay with the rewording? Are we all right? Anyway, I'm going to go to vote because I just need to move on. I need to give it to somebody else. So, all those in favour of the report, of the recommendations, against or abstaining? Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you, Jason. I feel cleansed now. But anyway, there. Item 15, budget monitoring and financial position, 1.7. I take it 15, 16. Yeah, is that who's taking 15, 16? Okay, thank you. Oh, Damon. Oh, yeah, TARDIS, yeah. Okay, item 15, yours, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Keyworth. I'm the Council's Director of Finance and Commercial Services. Item 15, the report in front of you is the budget monitoring position as at month 7. This summarises actually what will be a more detailed report as at month 8 that will go to the Finance Subcommittee early in the new year. As the report shows, we're currently forecasting an £18.7 million overspend. Very little in the way of headline changes since last month, and it's been a fairly steady position for some time now. So there's nothing specific in the report that I want to draw the committee's attention to, basically because that position has been fairly stable. If the current position is repeated at year end, as the report says, we'll have about £16.5 million of the original 70 million of reserves that we set aside to manage the council's financial position left over. So the rest will have been used to get to that position. The challenge this year so far, and it still is the case, is delivering savings that were approved as part of the 22-23 budget back in March. We have factored that expected non-delivery of 22-23 savings into the budget process for 23-24, which is one of the reasons why some of the committee budget challenges have been pretty difficult this year and pretty significant. The committee's specific position for strategy and resources has worsened a little bit during the last month, but the fundamental reasons, again linked to savings delivery, remain the same. Happy to take any questions on that, or on the capital position. If you've got questions on the capital position, which is reported in the appendix, I might just ask my colleague sat over there, Damien, to join us if I'm unable to answer.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, can we take those recommendations? Okay, thank you. And that's obviously 16, 15, 16. So then we move to 17.
Sorry, Chair, if I can. The item 16 still needs to be considered. There's specific recommendations in there. 16. Item 16. David, do you want to introduce?
Hi, I'm Damien Watkinson. I'm Finance Manager for the Capital team. I'm moving us to each month the variations to the capital programme that have been brought through approvals process this month, and this month we've also got a grant to recommend for acceptance. So under Transport Regeneration, Climate Change Committee, we've got some feasibility works to be done around the new Enterprise Centre under the Levelling Up Fund at Attercliffe. We've got the feasibility works to be done for the Arundel Bus Gate, which will be part of the Clean Air Zone development. We've got some traffic schemes, some 20-mile-an-hour schemes, which are actually just coming back as reporting a saving on the final cost of those. So that's some good news because that can be moved back into the programme. Under Communities, Parks and Leisure, we're moving forward with the new 3G pitch at Parson Cross Park. It's part of a bigger scheme. There's going to be another pitch in the Burngreave area, which will be moved on at a later time, but the Parson Cross site's been identified now, and as I said, we're moving to accept some funding from the Cruyff Foundation, and that's what it relates to this item. In housing, we've got increased costs on the Newstead site, which was going to be a site for new old person independent living and general needs housing. There's work being done to enable that site. Costs have increased significantly there. It's outlined in the report around the asbestos-containing materials and other items that have really dogged that site in terms of development, and so it does need a significant increase of around £2.5 million in its budget in order to be able to remediate that site and make it suitable for development. Then under education, children and families, we're doing initial feasibility work funded through Section 106 funding on Warncliffe Primary School. That's due to the new development to the Uterbridge Mill site, so we've got funding from the developer there, looking now to expand the Warncliffe side school, under which the primary, where that's the catchment for those schools. And then finally, on the essential compliance, if you will, strategy and resources area, the corporate area, it's an increase in budget of 85,000 in order to be able to put in place the new fuel store for the town hall's emergency generator. So the existing fuel store was no longer suitable for purpose, so it's just come back a little more expensive than thought. It's a specialist piece of work, and this is to allow us to award that contract.
Thank you, David. We've got a number of questions. So I've got Shafak, Martin, Joe, and Douglas and Mick. Okay, Shafak.
Mine's Arundel Gate, Bus Gate. And the issue here is that we seem to be running yet another experimental traffic order. This allows installation of the bus lane while running the public consultation in parallel, as well as assessing the benefits. So basically, has there been any public statement on this previously? Or is this the first time people are going to hear about it? It's on a capital approvals month 7, 2022-23. And then I've got another question on.
I've actually asked colleague Tom Finnegan Smith to join us.
in case there were.
Hence why I
issues
asked
on
the
this.
question. Because I saw him walking in, so I thought, he must be here for the purpose.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Tom Finnegan-Smith, the Head of Strategic Transport, Sustainability and Infrastructure. So in terms of the bus gate for Arundel Gate, which is part of our overall clean air plan to be rolled out alongside the clean air zone, the bus gate has been included in key decisions on the clean air plan to date. So in October last year, when the cooperative executive at the time approved the range of measures to be delivered, it was referenced in that decision.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the other question then is, obviously recently there's been some reporting in the Star around predicted income, in particular the figure of around 700,000 a month and 8 million a year. Now, how much of that will come from this? Do you have a... Are you able to get that number for me today, or can you come back to me with it?
So, through the chair, the financial forecast around the clean air zone doesn't include any forecast around the bus gate. So there isn't a financial forecast within that overall number associated with the clean air zone charges.
So there could be even more on top of income from this?
Clearly what we would expect is that through signing, proactively kind of informing people about the bus gate, that we wouldn't want income from that. There may be people that do abuse that, and there may then be some income associated with the bus gate, because we would, to make sure that the bus gate is not subject to kind of any ongoing abuse, we would want to make sure that it was enforced.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Frank. Marty?
Yeah, it's just a question or a request around the 20 mile an hour proposals. So support them, anything for traffic safety. But I remember that at the beginning of the programme there was an assessment made about which one should, prioritisation. We've just had a very serious RTA in the ward that I represent within the proposed 20 mile an hour zone. And thank God, it's right next to the Scout Hut, so thank God it was at a different time. But had that accident happened, that sort of when really serious, so it's just a plea. Can we make sure that as we prioritise these projects coming to proposal, we don't just stick to the original list, we factor in any incidents that are happening during the programme? Can I have that assurance?
Through the chair, I'd be happy to take that away. We are at the next TRC policy committee presenting I think there are 5 schemes that are coming forward for approval. Within the front end of those reports, the overall programme is set out. More than happy to raise that at the meeting in terms of our ongoing review. We do look at that annually to ensure that the programme and the rollout of that is kept up to date. So I'm more than happy to highlight that within that process.
Cheers, Martin. Joe?
Thanks. So just following on from the previous questions on the Arundel bus gates. So my understanding, based on what's been said so far, is that the cooperative executive agreed that clean air plan proposals, including the zone and the bus gates, that the government has then taken that and agreed with it and basically turned that into a direction to us that we are now legally obliged to follow. No? No? Okay. So, well, okay. So, I mean, the question is, I mean, do we have a choice about this bus gate? Can we decide we don't want it and not approve this capital today? You know, I'm struck that if we don't have a choice, that the words consultation and the word experimental are both somewhat fictional, aren't they? And perhaps we should have done the consultation before making the original decision under the cooperative executive, whenever it was.
Thank you. The direction that we have from government, as you say, does set out the government's response to our clean air plan submission. So we submitted the full business case to government earlier this year, following on from the October decision last year. The direction sets out a range of measures, including the clean air charging zone, but a number of traffic management measures in Rotherham, because it is a joint direction between ourselves and Rotherham, which they've had to promote traffic regulations orders for and other things. For us, the bus gate is part of that direction. The experimental traffic regulation order allows us to receive feedback from people while that scheme is in place, but also allows us to kind of potentially change aspects of the scheme, should it be required, when we're moving through into the implementation of the Transforming City scheme for the city centre, which also proposed a bus gate in that location. So bus priority measures and wider city centre Greater Green style transformation are part of that plan. And the experimental traffic order will lead into the detailed design of that scheme. So there may be certain changes that we may want to make as we move forward. The experimental traffic order allows us to implement that, to get feedback during that first 6 months, and then finalise our proposals as schemes move forward. We have undertaken engagement on the ETRO, and at the moment there are no objections to the ETRO proposals. We've been discussing with businesses, with the library obviously, who have access. Should be worthwhile me highlighting that the bus gate is in a northbound direction only, and that is beyond the access to the Novotel and St Paul's accesses. So it is for that section to the north of Novotel. Southbound traffic can come all the way through as they do now, but northbound traffic is the issue that we're trying to influence there. Again, because of one of the acute air quality hotspots that we have in that area behind the Crucible.
So do we have a decision to make today, or do we have a choice, really, or not?
Can I answer that, Joe? Yeah, yes, we do have a choice, because if we don't award it, then there'll be no money for the ETRO, is my understanding. Is that right, Tom? Because it's a following question to Joe's. If we don't decide today, then the ETRO won't go ahead. Is that right? Because it's just a capital in view of that. And the issue is, if I could just on back to Joe's question, I know other members want to come in, so but just on that point, if it doesn't go, the ETRO, that won't affect the charge, because the charge is for every vehicle that it will be charged for on the ring. So they're going to have to come on the ring road to come into the city centre to go through that bus gate. My nervousness, I have to say, is that's another blockage of movement through the city centre that you've took out actually the opportunity of travel through the city centre. So you're only going to go on to certain parts of the road or get out the city, because we're not able to get to Redgate. Well, I know it's Redgate's roundabout. We're not that option for motorists will have gone. Is that or is the ETRO for a time-bound bus gate? Sorry, Joe. I just wanted to clear that.
Thank you. So you're right, Chair. If the capital approval isn't forthcoming today, then we won't be able to implement those measures, because we won't have that funding approval to move forward in that way. In terms of the access through the city centre, the bus gate isn't proposed for just peak hours. It is proposed through the day. It will restrict the movement of vehicles northbound from that point north of the Redgates. Sorry, north of Novotel. I've got Redgates on the brain now. So it will influence how people can move through the city, but it is directly proposed to do exactly that, because the air quality emissions need to be influenced, and it's predominantly the levels of traffic and the type of traffic that are using that route, which we need to influence. So we have included it as part of our overall clean air zone, clean air plan tests, and therefore it is included as one of the mitigation measures that we've submitted to government, and they have approved. So yeah, those issues are as you've set out.
I've got.
I'm not quite finished on that. I just want to be clear on the nature of the direction that we have, whether or not it includes this gate in part of the plan. Aside from the zone, the plan was a number of things, as you said. The plan is the zone plus traffic management measures, including, as I understood, the bus gates. And so if we're obliged to do it under that, then the kind of decision's been made. Or what is the nature of that obligation? Is that something that is worth reconsidering and worth unpacking? I mean, I just want to be clear what options we have.
Thanks. David?
The direction is to reduce air quality.
Or to improve air quality.
Improve air quality, yes. Yeah, to improve air quality and get it within the legal limits within next year, but as soon as possible. So this was put in in our business case as one of the measures which will do that. If we don't approve that, then we'd have to look at whether we could still meet that direction.
I don't know, Thomas, it's also worth, is it also worth just asking, I mean, presumably in our plan that was signed off by government, the fact that this was going to be an experimental traffic order and therefore that we would be consulting on it is in the plan. So government have signed this off knowing that we are going to do some consultation on it and that the detail of the implementation should be influenced by that. But I think, so to your point, Joe, about whether there is any likelihood of the consultation having an impact, I think we should assume that it would, because they know that that's what we're doing. I think that's a different matter to saying we're not going to do something that is part of the agreed plan.
Thank you for that. I mean, yeah, to my mind, if it was a genuine consultation, I mean, I don't want to say that we don't do genuine consultation in the council, but if it was a consultation and an experiment that had more than one plausible outcome, then I'll be a lot more relaxed about it than if saying, actually, we're just using the experimental thing as a device to do it before we've consulted. So yeah, that would be my concern. I don't think we're well enough informed to turn around and say no today, unfortunately. But equally, I don't think I'm sure we've had sufficient discussion, or indeed if TRC have had sufficient discussion to say yes, definitely that's what we want, and we want it to be permanent. So perhaps a genuine consultation, a chance for the people of the city to say yes, this is fine by us, or this is really getting in my way, or whatever. Maybe that is the best outcome that we can get here. But I hope, if that's the case, that we get the consultation, and we listen to the outcome, we listen to the responses, and we consider it again, and we don't just default into a permanent bus gate. Is that something that we can achieve? People are nodding. Some people are nodding. Okay, I'll take that. Thank you.
Okay, just on this, because there's people signalled to come in, and I've got Mick, I've got Douglas, Paul, Martin and Brian. So I just want to finish this point off rather than jump back to it. So Mick, is it on this point? Yeah. Okay, I'm just for there then, Mick. So Douglas, is it on this point? Yes, I'm on. Another, okay. Martin's on this point on the bus gate. I'll bring you in, okay, and then Brian. All right, I'll take them in that order. I just didn't want to go off onto another subject and come back. So Mick, Douglas, and then Brian and Martin. Okay.
Mine is probably a much simpler question, but it is to do with this busgate thing. This question is coming from a non-driver and someone who finds it very difficult to see things in the abstract. So I'm trying to work out just exactly how this is going to work on that road, because at some parts of the day it is very, very busy. And if you're saying, it sounds as though people are going to get so far up Arundel Gate and then realise that they've hit a bus gate, and where will they go then? Because outside here, at certain times of day, we've got utter chaos because their cars come up and then they realise that they can't go through the bus gate outside here. And you've got them trying to turn round. We've had huge lorries trying to turn round. So we've got to avoid a situation where we repeat that. And I do hope somebody's going to do something about the chaos outside here and because of the bus gate.
I'll bring Douglas and others in and we'll kind of answer those questions. Douglas?
Yeah, just a short point. I mean, it's no surprise that I can support improvements on clean air and better flowing buses. So we just wanted to say that.
So do I. The fact that I asked a question about it doesn't mean that I don't support them either, Douglas.
I mean, but they are really important things, and obviously, we've heard it's part of the clean air plan. I mean, I think the important thing here is that the reason you've got an ETRO is presumably because you sometimes want to make tweaks to that. The really important thing in here is the engagement with a place like the Novotel and all the businesses that need to be serviced along that route. You know, of course, this has already been consulted on through the Connecting Sheffield programme. So, you know, it's all been in there as well as being built into the clean air plan that's been signed off by government. So I'm just making that point, really.
Cheers, Douglas. Brian and then Martin.
Yeah, it's just understanding what's the traffic that's going on there now. Where's it coming from? Because it's through traffic that we're looking at stopping. So is it where it's coming up Air Street and then going through? Where's it going to be? What's the modelling showing where it's going to go? Where's it going to displace it to? Because if you're coming up to the roundabout at the top of Air Street and then you push back down, you're sort of going all around, and I can't see how that's going to help on the air quality within the city centre when you're pushing them further away to go around. So it's just understanding what the modelling's showing and where it's displacing the current traffic flows that are going through there, and do we know where they're coming from? And because private vehicles going through there, they either come up Norfolk Street, and then you know you've got to go back down, or they're going down Commercial Street, aren't they? Because you can't go anywhere else off it really. So it's just trying to understand why. What traffic is using it, where it's coming from and where it's going to be diverted to.
Cheers, Brian. Martin?
Yeah, it's just clarification, something that I didn't twig until we've had this conversation. So am I right in thinking that if an exempt vehicle goes into the clean air zone, but then goes through the bus gate, they get charged? And if a vehicle that is not exempt goes into the clean air zone and through the bus gate, they get charged twice. Is that correct? Is that what we're being asked about here? Thank you.
Cheers, Martin. And just to add on to that, my understanding was the reason why we had the ring road as a charging point was that it would capture most vehicles going across the city that then went into other neighbourhoods that didn't have it. So therefore, those cleaner vehicles would help in them situations. So I don't understand how the bus gate's going to help that if our understanding is that the ring road will be a deterrent for polluting vehicles to come into the city centre because they'll get charged. Why a bus gate then would be some sort of deterrent, because theoretically, if we didn't want that and we wanted clean vehicles in, then we wouldn't need them. I don't understand, is the bus gate for traffic management or is it for clean air? Can you just sort me that one out? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and take those in turn if I can. So, in terms of the design, Councillor Rooney, of the bus gate. So, ultimately the design of the bus gate will accommodate turning vehicles close to the point of that bus gate, so that people driving along Arundel Gate, there will be advanced signs warning that if you go beyond, so if you're going on Air Street towards Furnival's roundabout, if you go beyond, that you can have access to the car park and other access to businesses, but it's a no-through route. so that those vehicles trying to go towards, say, Park Square roundabout along Arundel Gate will have clear signing in advance that they cannot use that as a through route. The actual design of the temporary arrangements will accommodate existing movements turnaround movements close to the Novotel access. Through the Transforming Cities scheme, there'll be a permanent scheme introduced, which may need to be refined, our current thinking, depending on the feedback through the ETRO consultation. That design will look very similar to a design we've implemented close to the Castlegate changes. So where we've closed Castlegate as part of the Greater Green work, there is, if you go towards the hotels, effectively a turnaround function where if you go further on, you go through a bus gate and potentially would be subject to a penalty unless you're exempt from the bus gate, to allow people to get round in a suitable fashion. Again, there's advance warning, but there always has to be that ability at the point where there's that restriction for people to go back if they aren't exempt and predominantly aren't public transport. So the design will accommodate that. In terms of diverted traffic will principally go to Surrey Street. So in air quality modelling terms, the site along Arundel Gate is our worst site, and we were having to kind of make changes across the city centre to deal with those. So we tested the outcomes based on the clean air zone to see whether that achieved compliance. A category C didn't on its own achieve compliance at Arundel Gate. That meant that we needed to do more than a category C. We have previously tested category D zones, which included charging all cars, but actually, given that it was one location, we tested two other measures on there. One was the bus gate, and the other part was in dealing with anti-idling from buses on Arundel Gate. And both of those measures, without going up to a category D, achieved compliance. So those are the measures that we'd set out and included in reports and the submitted clean air plan to government. So the bus gate, above and beyond the clean air zone, has an air quality benefit, but also an aligned traffic management benefit to the Connecting Sheffield Transforming Cities scheme that is coming forward. So it does effectively stop a certain proportion of traffic going along Arundel Gate, therefore emissions from vehicles go down. There is displacement, and that's captured in our modelling that we've undertaken. So Surrey Street is the main place that those vehicles will go to when the Arundel Gate bus gate is in. And the bus gate has the benefit of locking in some of the public transport benefit that we're seeking to deliver as part of the Connecting Sheffield scheme. So it's both, it is a traffic management scheme, but it has an air quality benefit and a public transport benefit within the city centre. The public transport benefit is effectively the journey time savings that get locked in as part of the Connecting Sheffield changes to bus routes across the city centre. So it's serving two purposes in terms of the scheme that goes in. So in terms of charges as a result of people going into the zone, so anybody that goes into the zone in a non-compliant vehicle, so it's buses, HGVs, coaches, taxis, private hire vehicles and LGVs, and obviously we've got a staggered date for some of the introduction of when charges will apply to certain vehicles, and a range of other exemptions from CAS charges for other purposes. If somebody drives in a non-compliant, say an old HGV that isn't Euro 6 diesel, then they will have to pay a CAS charge, a CAS related charge. If that same HGV were to travel through a bus gate, either at the one proposed on Arundel Gate, or say any of the other existing ones within the city centre, and they are not exempt from that, any of those bus gates, then they would potentially be subject to a penalty charge notice for abusing that restriction. So the charges are separate for different purposes, but charges will be applied where enforcement is in place for an appropriate abuse of any kind of restriction.
Thanks, Tom. I've got a couple more questions. Paul wants to ask a question on another subject. Douglas, did you say you wanted to? So, yeah, so I'll bring Paul, then I'll come back to yourself. Unless there's any more questions on this until we round up. Okay, Paul.
Why is the general fund being used for newsstands and not the HRA budget?
Yeah, apologies. No. For the new set enabling budget, no, it is HRA borrowing and one-for-one receipts, which are the council housing sale receipts. So that is ring-fenced for HRA. So it's not. There's no general fund in there. I apologise if it does say general fund anywhere in there. I apologise because it shouldn't do. But no, it is just funded from HRA borrowing and the council housing sale receipts.
Thank you, Damien. Douglas, want to raise on the other point?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to ask about football, actually. First, easy question is, do you know where the pitch is going to be in Burngrave? That's, or if you can say.
No, I'm afraid I don't at the moment. I think it was they were looking at a site initially at Ellesmere Park, but that's so at the moment I think they're still trying to identify the site for that. That's why this one's coming forward first.
Right. Okay, that's fine. The harder question is, what do we know about Dutch law? So just the serious point is about, where are we with the risk and the governance here? Because just reading the fairly detailed report there in the second appendix about this whole agreement's governed by Dutch law, there's unlimited indemnification. Indemnification is wide and indemnified. That looks like there's a lot of scope for something in an area that, frankly, we haven't got anyone in the council who's expert in Dutch law and that sort of stuff. And but when does the indemnity start? When's it end? Because it seems to run on pretty well indefinitely over the, indefinitely. It's not about what the answer to that, but how do we know that we're okay with those risks that you've identified?
I'll hand over to David or Van der Valk.
Yeah, I'm a Dutchman. No, we don't know a lot about Dutch law, but I think one of these things is where you take a risk-based approach. That actually, if we think we can deliver, it's fine. If we think we're getting sticky, we'll start to get some specific advice on it. I don't know if that gives you the comfort you want, Douglas, but it's.
Thank you, Douglas. Shafak?
Sorry, I'm just prompted a question on the bus gate again, sorry. Just for clarity, I apologise if I didn't pick it up, but did you actually tell us the hours of operation or not? And secondly, given some of the issues we've had outside, will taxis be exempt from this bus gate fines or not on this occasion?
Through the chair, the bus gate is a permanent 24-hour bus gate. The proposal is to allow taxis and private hire vehicles through that bus gate.
Okay, thank
you. Okay, thank you. Is there any more questions, comments on the Brian? Okay, on the recommendations. I'm just okay, Brian.
Yeah, I asked a question about where's the through traffic going, and I'm just confused now because you're saying there's a bus gate that's going to go in that's stopping traffic going beyond sort of Novotel. You're saying a lot of that traffic was going up through Surrey Street. And Surrey Street is now effectively a no-through route anyway, and I was just a bit confused with that. And then also, I was asking about the impact on where the other traffic is going to go. If we're saying there's the air quality issue going through there at Rundle Gate, if they're turning down at that roundabout, and I can't remember the name of the road as it goes down, then it hits down, you get Matilda Street, then you go into Shoreham Street, in front of the station, and back up, and you're going past the station, which is a big problem for air quality, and we're not pushing it out there. It's just on the basis of that, Chair, I'm just wondering whether we take out this recommendation about the Rundle Gate bus gate to get a little bit more information so we understand it, because I think there seem to be quite a few questions that have come up that have arisen from that there, and I'm just wondering whether we need to look at it and see if we need clarification. If it's the right thing, then so be it. But I think it's like a lot of other things. I want to make sure it's the right decision, it's the right thing going in, and we're doing it on the right. I've got the right understanding of things in there, so I'm just a bit confused with where we are with it, and if it's going to push the issue with the vehicles down to the station, which we know is another hotspot. It just seems a bit strange in going through.
Just so I understand that, I mean, we've got a meeting next week. Are you saying defer this part on the bus gate?
This part of it about the bus gate.
Until we get a full report on the impact.
Yeah.
So we need the impact of the ETRO and the bus gate on is that what you're asking for?
I'm not clear about taking that through at the moment. I'm not clear that it's the right decision to make that.
So what you're saying is defer the item on the ETO on the bus gate for the money, so we get a report back on the impact assessment, and we've got one next week.
Yeah, second it.
It's second, right? Okay, pull down that. All right then. So that's seconded. But everything else in the report, so let's take the report minus the bus gate first. Can we agree those recommendations and those capital spends? Agreed? Agreed? Anybody against? On the item then of deferring the bus gate, yeah, I'll just 2 seconds. So on the deferment of the bus gate, to come back with an impact assessment and remodel on the modelling that you're asking for, that's seconded by Councillor Shafik. So can I have a vote for doing that and bringing that report back to the committee? We're here next week, so by next week. So can I have a show of hands of that? All for? Yeah. Anybody against? Douglas, you want to? I'm just.
Yeah. I mean,
it's carried, but I mean, sorry. Do you want to
votes? Yeah, we're against that. I'm just saying, is there an issue here about, does this not breach the requirement of government, etc.? Do we need to approve the capital, but can understand there's need for more briefings afterwards?
Well, we'll get the report next week, and if there's a breach in there or whatever, we can say what we need is the impact assessment of making this decision on the movement around the zone, etc. Also, is that okay, Tom? Are we clear on that? Bringing an impact assessment. There must have been an impact assessment on putting ETRO and the bus gate in there.
So yeah, the impact assessment is wrapped up in terms of the appraisal of the scheme for the clean air plan that was presented to cooperative executive in October last year. So in terms of the submission of that plan to government that followed in the summer, we've set that out within that plan that's been approved.
I assume that report went to TRC anyway, that had the discussion the other week.
The assessment of, sorry Chair, do you mean the assessment of the, so the bus gate was included in the cooperative executive report when the clean air plan was approved, so the assessment is included in the work that was ultimately reported through as part of that decision.
Okay, so just on that, there must be an impact assessment and there must be modelling of where that traffic's going to go if we put that bus gate in. We must have done that piece of it.
So yeah, that work has been done. And apologies, Councillor Lodge, I've referred to Surrey Street. It's Sheaf Street that is the route. I've got Surrey Street bus gate in the mix as well. So
that's what I was thinking.
Redgate and Surrey Street came into the mix.
So we can bring that report next week. We've got a strategy and resources. We can bring that report next week. I'm just trying to get that on the agenda now because we've voted that through and we can bring that back next week. Is that okay? Can you find the report and bring it, and then at least members can have an informed decision?
We can bring information that we've on the modelling that we've done on this.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Right, can I just move
Sorry,
on?
Chair, could I just ask that for my benefit, there's some sort of diagram that shows what the road will look like, please?
Oh, okay, we'll get that, Mick. David, I want to know. David?
Can we just, again, agree that that can be an urgent item for that agenda because we haven't got 5 clear days?
I'm quite clear, yeah. Okay, thank you. Next item 17. Thanks, everybody. On to the budget. Ryan?
Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious I've got 4 minutes to present this item and deal with any questions. Do you want me to try and do that, or do you want to extend the meeting?
Now, can I ask that we extend the meeting by 15 minutes? I know it's very cold, but is that okay? Okay.
I think you have to do 30.
Okay, 30 minutes.
You don't have to take.
Okay, we don't. we might give us some more hot air. Okay, over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. Liz Goff would have been here to help me present this today because A, she's done all the work and so has her team, but unfortunately she's ill today and unable to join us, so apologies from Liz. So this is a working report, and members have had a number of these reports from me over time on the work done on the budget for 23-24 to date. There'll be a further and hopefully final working report to the Strategy and Resources Committee next week, with the budget papers then coming forward to Strategy and Resources ahead of full council on the 24th of January. As the report says, we're trying to close a gap here of about £79 million. That number does keep moving a little bit. It's an inevitable part of the process we're going through. And we've got proposals now endorsed by policy committees that total £55 million. So that leaves just under £24 million to go. Work is still in progress with members to determine whether a further roughly 7 million of savings that have been put forward can be agreed. And if most of those are agreed, we should end up with a remaining gap of just under £20 million. We expect the financial settlement from government to be better than the medium-term financial analysis that this committee saw back in July. We don't have any formal written confirmation of that yet, but we have read what we're able to read very carefully. We've checked it back with senior civil servants, and we do expect that the final financial settlement that we get from government will close the majority of that remaining gap, so to get it into the realm of low single figure millions, which at this stage in the process is quite a good place to be. So essentially I'm really hoping to be able to provide a positive update on that for the 12th of December, Strategy and Resources. I'm hoping to get something formal before then. Appendices 1 to 3, which are in the public part of this report, contain the specific proposals that have been endorsed by policy committees. The closed Appendix 4 relates to the Education, Children and Families Committee. That committee's work has always been running slightly behind that of other committees. Basically, they started late due to a change in the officer team supporting that committee. So that just means that the necessary conversations about some of those proposals have not yet been had with relevant trade unions, hence the confidentiality at this stage. That's the only reason that that's there. So the ask of this committee is to endorse the proposals that we have so far, that are set out in all 4 of the appendices. In respect of housing and specifically the HRA, that endorsement will allow officers to prepare papers for submission to the 1st of February full council meeting. And I'm happy, obviously, to take any questions that members have on the main report or appendices 1 to 3 in public. If you do have any questions on Appendix 4 that requires a detailed answer about a proposal in Appendix 4, we'll obviously have to move to a closed part of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Question, Mick?
They are on about Appendix 4, but I'll try and be very, very circumspect. The thing I would genuinely appreciate, Ryan, if you, and the other spokespeople and co-chair of that committee could meet with Mark Shake and have a discussion about some of the figures, because I'm finding it a little. There seems to be a time lag between the discussions that we're having as a committee and what I'm seeing in front of me on that appendix. So just for my own clarity and so that we're all on the same page, I would like to have, a half-hour session or so just to get clarity about where we are with the different, because I quite frequently come to these meetings and I see figures that don't relate to the last meeting that I attended with Mark Shake and others. Okay. Was that all right? That was vague enough.
Cheers, Nick. Martin?
Yeah, I've got a question or a comment, but it's not in connection with Appendix 4, but it's something for a closed session. It would be very brief.
Well, if there ain't any more, then we'll close the session and then allow members to ask that comment. Joe, is it in the appendix or is it an open question?
It's just an open question. So, I mean, I don't know if it's the wrong place to ask this, but I kind of expected to be locked in this room and to have made some tougher decisions than I'm seeing before us. I appreciate there's a lot of work has gone into the difficult things that are in here as well. When do we get locked in this room? Is that going to be next Monday now, or the Monday after? At some point I'd like to know what the process we're going to follow for that is. That would be useful. I will just say, just as a point of information, myself, Mike, Champion and Lexi Diamond are due to observe some street lights in action going up and down tomorrow evening. So we may have some more green savings for you after that.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, just on the items then, for now, then I'm going to close the meeting and then we'll take it in closed session. But can we agree the savings or the recommendations that are put to us, pending that obviously the questions, just for formality before I close the meetings? So yeah, all those in favour, please show him. I think we'll have to show his hands on these. Thank you. And thanks everybody for tuning in today, much appreciated. And I've no doubt we'll see each other next Monday. So thank you very much.